Yes, you are. We're just going to go live and put up the flash screen now. All the
Okay.
tests were successful. We're in good shape.
Okay, perfect. How did Mr. Distance?
Yes, you are. We're just going to go
Take a
live.
minute to come off of mute. Hi there, ESP Ellison.
Okay, perfect. How did Mr. Distance?
Good evening, DSP. How are you? Take a minute to come off of mute. Hi there, ESP Ellison.
Okay, perfect. I'm hearing you. I'm hearing you. I'm well. Thanks for asking. I trust you are fine as well.
Yeah, most things are well. I'm good. Afternoon, Tanisha.
All right, let's turn on video. We're going to get started. Excellent, Mr. Distance. Leo, Commissioner Anderson.
Yes, I am here.
Let's turn on video. Excellent. Good evening, Commissioner Anderson.
Hi, good evening.
Commissioner, good evening.
Good evening, everyone.
Excellent. Norman, you're on mute. Okay.
Good evening, Commissioner. This is Leo Gilling.
Hi, good evening. Again. Hi, Lee.
Great.
So we'll wait another minute and we'll get started. Okay, let's go and we'll get started. Ruki?
Welcome, everyone. My name is Ruki Wilson, the Chair of the Jamaican Diaspora Task Force Action Network, Citizen Security and Safety Task Force. Welcome to this evening's Town Hall. I would like to introduce our Chair of JD-TAN, the Jamaican Diaspora Task Force Action Network, Mr. Leo Gillen.
Thank you, Ruki. Appreciate the welcome. I would like to officially welcome everyone, and especially to Commissioner Antony Anderson. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. We expect a large turnout of people, and they're taking their time. They're coming in. It's a lot of people coming in right now. Thank you for joining us. A lot of persons have always been asking questions about citizen security and everything that goes along with us coming back home. So this is a great opportunity for us to hear you, to listen to you, tell us about the status of what's going on the island, and also what are the things that will allow us to come back with ease, with the ease of travel and the ease of living, coming back home to live. Good evening, Mr. Lloyd Distant. Thank you so much for the opportunity to collaborate with you, and thank you so much for the patience that you have shown us over the past couple of weeks. I met you about a month ago, and you have lived up to everything that we expected of someone in your capacity. Thank you so much. I want to also welcome the other members of the task force that are here, the persons in the background, the persons who are going to help us with the question and answer segment. I also now want to recognize our moderator for the evening, Judge Norman Hemming. Thank you, Norman. Every time we call, you respond. Thank you so much for being the person you are. You are right for this job. Thank you, Ruki, for introducing me and for the rest of the staff. Just to tell you a little bit about the Jamaica Diaspora Task Force Action Network. We have close to 14 task forces, action task forces. Task forces are project oriented. They're not 501c3 organizations. We spend our time identifying gaps, identifying challenges on the island of Jamaica, and each task force goes out and try to fill those gaps. We in the past year and a half, we've given out, or we've conducted over 150 workshops for teachers, for nurses. For teachers, we've registered over 13 or 14,000 teachers that are on our platform, and each of our workshops has at least 700 persons and maximum 4,300 persons on any one workshop. So we've doing our due diligence. Mr. Distant has promised us to extend the same type of workshop situations for our police officers, because we do have the skills that we can extend our services out to our police officers. So bring them on. We know we have probably about 14,000 police officers. We want to be able to help as much as we can fill the gaps in professional development or any other areas or services that we can offer. That's what we're here for. We have other task forces in agriculture, education, behavioral health, in health task force, behavioral health task force. We have technology and entrepreneurship and several other task forces that are here for Jamaica to dig in and see how we can help and they can help us to help. And so with that in mind, I want to hand this over to our moderator, Mr. Norman Hemming. Thank you. Norman? There you are. Unmute.
Right. Good afternoon and welcome here this evening. We're here this evening with two of the largest, not in size, but the largest in terms of movers and shakers on the island of Jamaica. Two people who perhaps have done more to transform the Jamaican economy, to transform the Jamaican social scene, and to revive the entire Jamaican economic scene through the work that they have done on both sides of the aisle, not in terms of parties, but in terms of the different and the disparate type of work that they have been involved in traditionally. So the first person that you're going to be hearing from this evening, Mr. Lloyd Distant, is the head of the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce. And as we look today in the United States at this this situation where we have a strange and interesting vote in the United States, well, the organization that Mr. Distant actually stands as the CEO over was started some 3 years after the American Independence Day in 1779 on the island of Jamaica. And it represents all the foremost elements of the private sector in Jamaica. For those of you who care, Mr. Distant is, of course, a graduate of Campion College, perhaps one of the high schools in Jamaica where the greatest of Jamaicans attend, besides, of course, Calabar, which is where our great commissioner is from, and, of course, Jamaica College, which is where I graduated from. The other thing about Mr. Distant that everyone should know is that he's perhaps the most respected person in the private sector in Jamaica. And everywhere that you go, you hear people speak about him and speak about the things that he's involved in. And one of the things that he's involved in, of course, is in trying to change crime, violence, and corruption on the island of Jamaica. The other person that you're going to be hearing from this evening needs no introduction. He's, of course, the Commissioner of Police for the island of Jamaica. He is a graduate, as I told you before, of Calabar High School. Major General Anderson is a Justice of the Peace for Kingston, and he's a recipient of the Order of Distinction, Commander Class. He is the most trusted person on the island of Jamaica. No matter where you are, no matter what you're going through on the island of Jamaica, even in the midst of this COVID pandemic, the entire island is focused on not only the Ministry of Health, but they're looking towards him and to this wonderful force that he's running that was founded many more years prior to the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce. They were actually founded in the year 1716. So this is the august organization that he runs on the island of Jamaica. And you're going to get a chance to hear from him shortly throughout the course of this evening. And it's interesting that the Jamaica Constabulary Force's motto is "You troke, serve," or meaning both sides. And it makes sense that we're going to be hearing both sides this evening, as these both sides are coming together to give us one perspective on crime, violence, corruption, and the role of policing. At the end of both presentations, each of you will have an opportunity, each of you in the listening audience on YouTube will have an opportunity to present questions that they will answer either directly here this evening, or they will answer over the course of the ensuing weeks as they'll be providing contact information as the program continues. So at this time, without any further ado, we're going to turn it over to our first speaker for the evening, Mr. Distant, who's going to bring us a very unique perspective. Lloyd Distant, could you go ahead for us now?
Thank you so much, Judge Hemming Norman. And thank you so much for that kind introduction. Of course, you didn't mention as a Liverpool fan amongst also being a Campionite, but I'll get that under guidance. Leo, thank you and the JD10 team for providing us the opportunity to share what it is that we're doing in Jamaica and what it is that we're doing differently from what we've done before in terms of resolving and taking a handle on reducing this scourge of crime, violence, and corruption that has held grips on our country for so many years. As I'll just share some information, I won't take the time to read in detail some of the points that will be on the screen, but just to speak to providing a view that, as part of the background, some 30, 40 years, at least 40 years now, we've been speaking about crime in Jamaica, and going through varying governments, ministers, even police commissioners, we have been unable to find a way to sustainably reduce crime in the country. I recall in one of my first meetings with the commissioner, he would have shared, we've had periods when crime has dropped, but then it has risen back up and gone well above where it was before. And that's largely because the information shows that the efforts that we embarked on were not sustainable and certainly didn't have the buy-in of all the people of Jamaica. So we embarked on a program to forge a national consensus. And this national consensus was premised on the fact that there are some deep-rooted problems and issues that we know are likely to span several administrations. We're not going to solve crime in 2 or 3 years. We're going to require a sustained effort over an extended period. And the way to ensure that the programs, the policies, and the priorities do not change from year to year is by ensuring that the political directorate on both sides, or on all sides in the country, have agreed that we're going to keep this as a priority, notwithstanding which political parties in power. And largely speaking, we certainly would have seen this on the side of the economy when we formed the EPOC, and there were naysayers who says it's not going to happen, and we found government, opposition, private sector, civil society agreeing a way forward. So it was very important for us to identify a bipartisan approach that spanned a solution. We also recognize that we elect politicians to do a job, but they are politicians, and oftentimes the right decision might get deferred because there's a political risk. And one of the things that we identified in this, if we could share that political risk, then it's more likely that the right decisions will be taken faster for our country. As we went through the process, we identified that there are some key strategic decisions that needed to have been made. We speak about, to prevent this, we really need social and community transformation. The culture that we have is not the right culture. We need to deal with issues of dispute resolution, amongst other things as well. We have acknowledged that the transformation of the Jamaica Constabulary Force is absolutely necessary, and the Commissioner will speak a bit more about that as we proceed. And of course, recognizing the role that corruption plays in the challenges we have with crime and violence. So, one of the questions I get all the time is, well, what's different? Why is it going to work this time? And I'd highlight a couple of points just very quickly. This is the first time in 40 years, as we've spoken about these kinds of initiatives, this is the first time that we have government, opposition, the private sector, civil society. And when I say civil society, the corruption watchdogs, the churches, the trade unions, the women's movement, the youth movement, they've all come on board and signed this consensus because the confidence exists that we have an opportunity to align our thoughts on reducing crime in Jamaica. The consensus program as well is pretty comprehensive. We don't just look at crime fighting and the transformation of the police force. We spend some time ensuring that we understand the legislative changes that are required, the social and community transformations or an approach to social and community transformation programs that will change the culture of the country. So it's a quite comprehensive program. And I'll sort of touch on some of those areas as I proceed. Mentioned earlier about the bipartisan and civil society agreement, and that's about the sustainability. So this is not a short-term program. This is not 2 months or, sorry, it's not a 2-year program. We're looking at this extended over a real extended period for success. And on the back end of it, it's about how do we hold ourselves accountable? So we have a program, we say this is what we're going to deliver. How do we ensure it's done? And we agreed a program we agreed the existence of a mechanism for monitoring and oversight of this program. Another question that has come up very often is, there's so much research out there, we don't need to recreate the wheel. Are we good? Is this an evidence-based approach? And I just want to assure the persons watching and viewing this that there's a working group that was formed that was made up of 3 of Jamaica's most erstwhile academics. And these are not persons who are just academics, these are persons who have spent time in the field and truly understand the challenges that exist on the ground and the challenges that have plagued us in doing short-term initiatives, short-term programs, and not getting sustainable results. So this was very much an evidence-based approach using research and analysis. It was very inclusive in terms of the dialogue that took place, and the solutions that we arrived at, we believe, are certainly the ones that will give us the most impact, or the greatest impact, in resolving the scourge of crime and violence. In building this consensus, I mentioned some of the groups, and some of them are represented on the slide in front of you. But in building this consensus, we'd have sat with close to 60, 70 different representatives of different bodies, just to ensure that we were hearing from all the parties, hearing from both persons who are academic in their or research based in their nature, but also persons who are actually sitting within the communities and understand the real impact that this has had on them and their other persons living in that community as well. So let's share very quickly that the foundation of all of this is that for sustainable reduction, we need to attend to the preventative aspects of crime and violence. And that means taking it all the way back to social and community transformation. But as we identified that, there were some priorities that we needed to really grab. We need to get rid of criminal gangs. We need to look at the troubled communities and understand how we reintegrate them back into society. We certainly recognize, and one of our biggest challenges is corruption and collusion. And saying to ourselves that we need to have non-tolerance for corruption in our society. And of course, it's not just about the modernization of our policing system, the JCF, but we also need modernizing in our justice system as well. I spoke about the comprehensive nature of the program. We certainly recognized that we needed to cover quite a few bases in developing the plan and developing a program that we believe will deliver for Jamaica. So the tagline is, there are no quick fixes. I pause again, there are no quick fixes. I know our desire would be, and the commissioner would say, he would love to see crime drop from 1,100 to 400 in 1 year. We would like it to get there. It's not necessarily pragmatic. And even if we got there, we need to ensure that what we're doing gives us sustainable results. So there's a targeted, again, there's a lot of work behind this, a lot of detail. I'm just providing a high level view of the areas that we certainly will be focusing on. So we're going to be very targeted about how we attend to social and community transformation. So an evidence-based approach on the community and social programs that work, understanding from a scientific basis. Once we evaluate what's the impact of the programs, do we need to adjust the programs, prioritizing the communities that we need to go into with these programs. There's a development around there's a Violence Prevention Commission authorized by Parliament that will, or empowered by Parliament rather, that is going to form the basis of ensuring that we're getting the right programs delivered in the right way to the right communities. The transformation of the constabulary force, there are 4 key pillars that we identified. And again, the commissioner will speak to those. But from the consensus perspective, it's about supporting the anti-corruption focus that is currently coming out and within the force, ensuring accountability of the responsibilities and the results that they say they'll deliver. How we policing with the community, intelligence-based policing, utilizing more technology and tools in delivering a new approach or an improved approach to policing was very key in the consensus as well. We also recognize, as I said before, the importance of corruption, how government resources may end up in the hands of criminal networks, as an example. The major organized crime and anti-corruption task force, ensuring that it's fully independent. And also understanding the support that the legislative and the judicial system needs with respect to the Proceeds of Crime Act and anti-gang legislation as well. So there are those are 3 huge areas that we've pulled out that we have identified some immediate actions and approval and agreements that are required between government and opposition. And as I said before, government and opposition are fully aligned on those things and prioritizing how we're going to get those things resolved in a reasonable time frame. But it's not just, there are so many other legislative reforms that we know we need to focus on. So the constabulary force, whilst it's going through its transformation, needs a revised act. And there's a specific timeline agreed by government and opposition to have the revised act approved through Parliament and the regulations signed off. I mentioned before the Proceeds of Crime Act, anti-gang legislation, the communications, a new Firearms Act. So we have a number of these elements that we have recognized in terms of legislative reforms that are required to support the activities and actions of the JCF and the social and community organizations that need to effect specific initiatives. And whilst I've highlighted those, the consensus also encompasses a number of other legislations that need to be put in place. I mentioned before the alignment of the justice system or the modernization of the justice system, but it's not just about modernizing the justice system, it's also about ensuring that what is taking place in the justice system is aligned with the overarching program of the JCF modernization and the results we're looking to achieve through this consensus. Correctional services, some good work has been done there. A lot more areas need to be covered to modernize our correctional services, and recognizing the importance of community renewal. we all talk about those communities that pop up on the side of a hill, but we need to have better planning to ensure that these, wherever communities are popping up, that we actually have an urban plan in place to deal with those areas as well. So as I mentioned before, it's pretty comprehensive. It's covered a number of areas. Over time we can speak to them in more detail. I just focus on the right-hand side to speak to the fact that within the consensus, there are 38 areas of agreement. You will notice that from a legislative perspective, almost 40% of those agreements are legislative. Doesn't take away from the deliverables we require in the transformation of the JCF, social, community, and cultural transformation, or any of the other 7 areas that we have highlighted for attention and focus. So to give a very quick snapshot, really just to reinforce the point that the consensus is about ensuring that we have the tools and the capacity to fight crime in a sustainable way. But also, as we're doing that, ensure we're taking a comprehensive view of all the things that need to be covered in resolving the issues of getting on top of crime in Jamaica. I'll just take 2 or 3 slides to speak about how we're going to ensure continuity. So many of us would be familiar with the work of the Economic Program Oversight Committee. So some 7 years ago, 8 years ago, we would have met with IMF, recognized that we had challenges with our economy. And as a result, we would have taken a step into forming a committee, again, a bipartisan committee that will provide monitoring and oversight of the work of the government and the Ministry of Finance. The model that we're using is a very similar model. So the Consensus Monitoring and Oversight Committee consists of 16 representatives that represent a broad cross-section of Jamaica society, civil society, private sector, but it also has representation appointed, nominated and appointed by the Prime Minister, as well as the leader of the opposition. So a strong committee tracking and measuring results, reporting to the people of Jamaica, and going forward to the diaspora as well, to say, here are the commitments, here's the person who committed them, is that person delivering on the targets and KPIs that they have said they will deliver? And taking a very, utilizing a framework that is very deliberate in saying, here are the things we will do in these periods of time to deliver the results that we have committed to Jamaica. Mentioned as well that what will come out of this monitoring and oversight committee, at least every other month, we will be producing reports that will highlight how we're doing in terms of the results promised by the commissioner, the results, the consensus priorities that have been identified by the committee and committed by the government and opposition, as well as the other varying areas of legislative amendments and social transformation. A very robust report will be provided on a periodic basis, again, at least once a quarter, but most likely every 2 months, that will speak to the progress that we're making. Leo and team tried to provide a very quick snapshot, just have some limited time to go through here, but happy to come and spend more time on any one of those specific areas as we go along. The commissioner, I believe, will speak a little bit more about the areas related to transformation and crime fighting, but certainly happy to bring in other persons to speak about the legislative agenda, what we're doing on social and community transformations, amongst other things as well. So, Norman, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'll hand back over and.
Listen, thank you so very much, Lloyd. And just in case anybody thinks that Lloyd is new to this, this type of work, of altruistic work in the Jamaican community, He's not at all. In fact, he comes from a long line of people who are involved in this. Many of you may have known his dad, right? That was involved in the Kiwanis Club and the work that he did, not only in Jamaica, but also overseas with respect to that organization and helping to uplift and develop people. Thank you so very much for your very inspiring words here today. We're looking forward to hearing some more from you and answering questions a little bit after. And then, but we're going to hear now from the Commissioner of Police, Antony Anderson. Well, one of the things you might be wondering out there in the listening audience, why is this important? Why should we be discussing this at all? Well, 15.2% of all Jamaicans are going to be the victims of violent crime at some point in their lifetime. 18% of male youth in Jamaica are going to be victims of violent crime at some point in their lifetime. So these are very real things that are happening. And of course, we're looking not only at violent crime, we're looking at crime, violence, and corruption, and the role of policing. And as you've heard so far, and you'll hear even more coming up, that it's every segment of the Jamaican society that's coming together to put this plan together. It sounds very much like a plan that we have here under the Obama administration called the Violence Reduction Partnership. But it seems to be very much more in depth and very much more tailored for Jamaica itself. Without any further ado, let's hear from Commissioner Antony Anderson. Commissioner.
Okay, thank you so much, Judge Hemmings, for giving me this opportunity. I think the last time we interacted was in Florida, probably a couple days before the COVID lockdown occurred.
That's right.
Where I got the opportunity to do an actual town hall in person. And my, how things have changed over a few months. You know, 2020 is going to be a year that we'll all remember. But that I remember that particular town hall was sort of eventful for me personally, because whilst I was at the podium presenting, my granddaughter was born. I got the message, so it's interesting, interesting times. I remember that one. But just to say, you know, I think thanks for the opportunity, both for you, from you and from Lloyd and Leo and everyone who was given the opportunity to speak about what we're doing and how we're moving as a country, as a police force, how we fit into this overall thing. Obviously, we've embarked on, certainly, you know, I've embarked on a transformation program for the force over the past 3 years, just under 3 years I've been there, and we've embarked on this process. And it gives me an opportunity to say where we are now, some of our focus areas and what we're doing about it. But just before, I actually have a slide pack, so I'm going to put that up, and I'm going to go through as quickly as I can through that slide pack. I think it will better direct my conversation with those slides. But just before we get there, I think it's important that we make some basic distinctions between crime and violence, and violent crime and just crime, other crime. I think it's important in our context, because what we've really been plagued with is a lot of violent crime and violence in general, and hence the Violence Prevention Commission and all of that. And the reason why I'm making the distinction is because they operate slightly differently, or differently, not even slightly. Crime tends to be a function of profit or trying to get some benefit. You commit crimes to get that benefit. The violence tends to be very much predicted by previous acts of violence. And so interrupting that cycle of violence is a key component of what, whether it's law enforcement or other agencies that we partner with, do. So sometimes when we use them interchangeably, it becomes a little problematic in terms of the execution of solutions. So it's just, I just put that on the table because very recently, what we're seeing as well is a number of cases where the violence that plays out is a function of interpersonal and within the family type context and ending up with the death of people and so on. So that is, those people then become subject to law enforcement almost after they've committed the act. And I think very rapidly we get them into custody and all that and charge them. But the fact is that somebody's dead already because two brothers can't agree on land, or two sisters, and that sort of thing. But I'll speak more about it. Let me bring up my slide pack and we'll just move through it from here. Let's see, I'm trying to share my screen. Okay. Let me bring up this. Okay, it's coming up. Let me just takes a little while. Okay, good. Right, thank you very much. I'm sharing my screen now, and let me get through this as quickly as we can. Okay, so I always like to start here, just so that everybody has a sense of where we're coming from and what we're going through. I must say these graphs and stuff are on our website. You can go to the Jamaica Constabulary Force website and see some of these statistics. We put up weekly statistics if you want to follow what we're doing and how we're doing it. Again, we're talking about a period from 1960 where we're talking about 60 homicides per year, up to a high point somewhere around 2005, 2009, and 2017, where we were 1,600 plus. And that's what has happened since independence. Moving on to the next one, this is another slide that this is the last 20 years. And I use this simply to inform the discussion as we discuss this thing about homicides and violence, particularly violent crime. We've seen a consistency back to about 2001, where we have remained above, well, it dropped in 2003, just below, but largely been around 1,000 and above since that time. The reality is we crossed the 1,000 mark. It's not on this. We crossed that in 1997, I think it was. So we've been consistently up here, but it's important that the discussion that we have, and I'm sure that the whole business of CMOC and where we want to go with this is not so much how we address the piece above the line, but how we address that big block of 1,000 of our citizens being killed below the line. Let me just put some context to that. A recent study has once again confirmed, but a recent PhD work that was done and analysis of 300, over 300, just under 400 homicides that took place, noted that 78%, so approximately 80%, 78% of these homicides were of gang members or gang affiliates, or the families of gang members. So a huge portion of this, probably around 900 plus per year, are done by gangs, or on gang affiliates. That's a significant portion of that. And so there is a process to deal with the gang related, which is the large amount of it. There is another process clearly to deal with things of the interpersonal nature of violence, where families are killing each other. And then there's a small part of this that relates to just people going about their business and getting robbed and killed or something like that. But that's not by any means the highest proportion of this. So the policing context is the high levels of violent crime for decades, a pervasive gang culture, high levels of public disorder. And what we've been seeing now is the increased complexity of crimes. Most crimes now involve some aspect of devices, electronics, and also we've seen an increase in things like cybercrime and so on. This is interesting because although this came from a 2016 victimization survey, it's largely still like this, where young males are both the victims and perpetrators of a lot of the violence. And we also see this, that victims are often attacked by people they know, and that's the nature of inter-gang warfare and that sort of thing. And you have a very concentrated violence and violent crime related things. So you end up with things that we term hotspots. And clearly what has happened over time, because when you have high violence, it's pretty difficult to deal with other aspects of policing. There's a great proportion of our policing capacity and policing effort that goes towards dealing with violence and violent crimes in the spaces where that is most prevalent. And so that, to some extent, over time, has robbed the wider society of certain types of police responses around lesser things, or what is considered by probably by the community and even the country as lesser crimes than violent crimes. However, those other crimes, to the people who get their house broken into or whatever, they want to make reports on things that are less serious than a murder, their issues are equally as important to them as violence is important generally. And that is why we find in victimization studies the difference between what people experience themselves and their overall perception has quite a large gap. And there are a number of studies, there are IDB studies, there are victimization studies that anybody interested can look at with respect to that. So policing in 2020, and I'll just speak about that briefly. I think not only our policing context, but also there was a global context in which policing was taking place because of this pandemic. And some of our partners who we partner police forces who we liaise with, we've seen over that period significant increases in things like violence, shootings, murders, etc. Now, what COVID-19 did for us is that all of a sudden we had to take on a lot of activities to support the Ministry of Health. And clearly, when you have a pandemic and there is a security aspect to it, there is an enforcement aspect to it that is in addition to all the other things we do. We saw there established quarantine zones, which we then have to man. We have escort operations and all of these things to keep our community safe. We also have enforcement under the Disaster Risk Management Act, where our officers have to do enforcement to make sure that the requirements under that act are met by our population. We also, but it provided also an opportunity to engage our population in a way that we hadn't previously done. So it gave an opportunity for us to engage our population in the communities that we police and provide support to people who are indigent, who couldn't move, who couldn't really survive given all the strictures of COVID-19 and the Disaster Risk Management Act and all of that. The arrangements under those conditions are largely how do we protect people from COVID and manage as a country. But the fact is there are real people on the ground who need help. The Ministry of Health obviously doesn't have the capacity to reach everyone. And I think we're probably one of the few organizations that is everywhere in the country. And so we stepped up to this and we partnered with persons like the PSOJ to provide some relief to our citizens. And I'll give you just a brief example. What it allowed us to do as well is in St. James, where one of the initiatives we did down there, we have a robust quick response motorbike-based team that responds really to quickly in the St. James area to shootings and that sort of thing, robberies and so on. So they're a very rapid response team that's operating down there. Well, during this period, not only were they doing that, but because of the challenges with schools being closed within the parish, and a lot of the youngsters and students don't have access to internet in the way that perhaps people do in more developed places or in the town itself. So these quick response people were actually carrying homework to about 250 students up in the hills and taking it back to the school and going back and forth as part of their engagement with these young people. Now, you know, it's something we do now, but what we're doing is redefining our policing and our police officers in the mind of some young people that we will see the benefit of it down the road. Within our own organization, we had the high point of quarantine. We had just under 700 people quarantined, and that of which most were not positive, but that is the health requirement to quarantine them for that period. Now, when we take out 700 officers, that hurts us as an organization, but you know, over a 2-week, 3-week period, they come back on and so on. I think overall we've done pretty well. We've had 400, just over 400 or 450 positive cases in the organization since the beginning, confirmed positive cases. So that's not bad for 11,000 person organization. And a lot of the people we interact with may be positive, but they also tend to be non-compliant, and that's why we're enforcing. So overall, that's not too bad. Over the period, we added some additional zones of special operations. We had general elections and we had floods. And that partially defined 2020. So even with all of that, we got a 9% reduction in major crimes. We increased our clear-up rate on murders. We got our gang convictions. We'll speak a little bit more about that later on. And we did a number of things. We had to learn to adapt our training to this new reality. And we continued with a lot of the programs that we had in place and that we had scheduled to happen, but we just had to do it differently and smarter. So basically, these 3 pillars is really how we've been approaching not only transformation, but how we do crime reduction and control. So it's law enforcement, transformation, and stakeholder engagement. This is a very simple way of looking at it. This is our approach to dealing with our problems and getting a different type of force going, but a different reality for our citizens. And all of our divisional policing plans really reflect this suite of law enforcement activities, which starts with intelligence to investigations, really to operations, interventions, and then information operations and communications with the communities. And we basically, enhanced security measures, which over the period involved broken down into 2 ways. One is our states of public emergency, and the other one is our zones of special operations. We have a very deliberate anti-gang strategy. There is a science-based investigative strategy, enhanced police presence, particularly how we manage public spaces and traffic enforcement. Our internal investigation capacity has been built, and our community interventions is mainstreamed as a part of our policing strategy. Again, the idea of zones, and I'll is really, it's more of a development exercise, and it's really built, it's on a clear whole build strategy where we reduce the level of violence in a community so that community development and investment and social change can result from it. And it's something that, you know, it was a very unique act to actually tie in legislation, security and development activities. And it's something that's going back to Parliament. I think it's either today or tomorrow that we had a Joint Select Committee take submissions on changes to the Zones of Special Operations Act so that we can make it an even better process. So our anti-gang strategy is really targeting gangs as an organization. And this year, 2020, in the midst of all of that, we got our first conviction of a gang as a criminal organization, as opposed to gang members for predicate offenses like shooting or whatever. We found that targeting just the head of a gang can lead to two heads coming up and splitting the gang in two and end up with a lot of violence. So the approach, the strategy is, how do we collect them as a group, including their facilitators? And it's done through a lot of inter and intra-agency work, and intra-agency both locally and internationally. And the result is that we got these convictions, and we have a number of gangs lined up to continue this process on. The science-based investigative strategy, you know, on our cyber side, we're increasing the capacity within this unit that deals with cyber forensic and communications forensic. These are the people who look at devices that are taken from scenes, whether it's laptops, phones, whatever, that's taken from scenes, and we have developed and are developing further capacity to do this. There's pretty much, the way things are now, there's pretty much no scene that you'll find or no investigation that will not require cyber forensics. Ballistics, if you notice, there's a huge increase in how we're pushing. Capacity has increased, and also what we push towards that. And then DNA, if you look at the number of cases that we're doing, each case has multiple samples, and we're finding that that is working very well. You know, we have a case where a blood sample was taken from a scene, and then later on it matched a rape case that we had no suspect in the case until it matched our DNA database. This has led to an increase in clear-up overall of crime. And some divisions are up in the 60% and so on, and this is something we will continue to do. I'm very conscious of the time, so let me keep pushing through. Again, enhanced police presence, it is one, because of some of the technology we have in our vehicles now, it's allowed us to look at our response times in a much more critical way when we look at incidents and, you know, how quickly we get there and what happens. And then also within the metropolitan area, it's critical for us to roll out a quick response motorbike-based unit, which we've just very recently got the assets in to do that. And so we're going through the process of building that out. It used to exist a long time ago. It went away. Now we're doing it, and we're rolling it out within a particular structure. And our computer-aided dispatch system is just being revamped. And the match of those two allow us to track very specifically how well we are doing for service. And obviously, in terms of the presence, is how present we can be in the communities that we police, and how the relationship with those communities. Again, the public safety and traffic enforcement branch, which we structured a few years ago. That's still out there doing its thing. Using more and more Jamaica Eye as that is developed. It's a work in progress. Jamaica Eye still, as we add cameras, it increases our capability. We have it here, access to these, and we have not only we've responded based on images from Jamaica Eye, and of course it has helped a lot with our investigations, but beyond Jamaica Eye is actually just the use of CCTV at businesses, at private homes that have been very useful to investigators, and we have an act that allows us to recover that material. This is also something that we're working on in terms of developing our command and control center, or and even cyber communication center and so on. So really a C5 center and developing C2 centers across the island to better manage our resources and get them targeted or responsive to where a crisis occurs. Again, this is something, you know, just that we're redeveloping. I think I'd mentioned before at one of my previous town halls, is something we're working on. Doesn't stop. Lots of work for them. I've just sent some additional persons there to reinforce what they're doing, and this is a real important part of what we do. And they are the ones who work closely with Indicom on where it's a public matter, and also deal with our anti-corruption matters, working with MOCA internally. So this is an ongoing thing. They're very busy. Also on community, we have a proactive violence interruption strategy. When there's an act of violence, there's actually a documented strategy of how we intervene to prevent the next act of violence. Delay long enough to intervene, to get people to think about what they're doing, so that perhaps we won't have the next act of violence. Then we've been meeting with various stakeholders to see how we build out our domestic violence intervention programs. We have centers, and we're working with partners and other stakeholders to develop more of these centers, and also the program of training to deal with this at the very basic level of policing in police academy, how to deal with domestic violence issues, because that may be one of the first things you're going to see on coming out on the road as a police officer. So a number of the things, the other two, you know, is a number of the things I'd mentioned before relate to them. So let me move on quickly to force development, how we're doing, what we're doing in that regard. Okay, so that's really the first part of it. Is central to what we do is our people, and it's adequate, competent, and engaged workforce. One of the things we haven't done, and perhaps one of the things that has plagued us over time as a force in the narrative and discussion around the JCF, is the discussion has been about what has been related to crime, as these are the crime levels, and why aren't you fixing it? Why do we have crime when we have a police force? Without looking at what is the legitimate capacity of the JCF, manned as it is, with the technology it has, and with the budget it has, and the legislative support that it has. That has to be part of the narrative and question. And so we have to, certainly in our transformation, have to look at that and answer those questions. And then when you look at what our legitimate capacity is, then you can measure that against how are we doing based on what is legitimately expected of us. And then see what additional capacity is necessary in order to deal with our circumstances. So we did a bit of work around this. I mean, not everything. I mean, that needs to be a part of a rigorous academic study, which we, you know, are in the process of engaging people to determine that. But in our own way, we've determined a number of things. How many people we need through a very rigorous scientific process, we came up with that. How our training and development was now, how do I reach 11,000 officers spread across the country? But clearly, I have to reach them online. 9 months ago, that was novel. Nowadays, 9 months later, 10 months later, since COVID, we're having a town hall that way. So it's par for the course. We deliver schooling that way. But we were already down there, and we're going through a process. By mid-year, we should have a lot of our stuff online to deliver training. The transparent promotion process, that has been cemented in place. And the key is that how do we take care of our people? And how do we ensure that they have their issues taken care of as they take care of the entire country and security? Structurally, and there's a little timeline, as I said, we've been embarked on this process for a little while. We created our welfare department in June of 18, the public safety and traffic enforcement branch, August of the same year. We did the technology branch in June 2019 because we had so many technology projects doing and programs that you needed a structure to manage those forward. Our iPro in its current form, and that's our internal affairs, in July 2019. We redid the whole business of specialized operations, SWAT, and all of that in July 2019. And just this year in September, we developed the force development and logistics portfolio. And the force development portfolio moves forward the development activities in a coordinated project way until it can hand it over to the various branches who are going to run it in the long term. We had the expansion and restructuring of corporate communications and legal have been significant. Communications in terms of corporate communications in terms of our outreach. We see, as you said, as I had shown before, our stakeholder engagement is a critical part of what we do. We have had an 83% increase on some platforms, up to 83 for us in our social media engagement. And so that again is a benefit of us reaching out during COVID to provide information and provide a mechanism for people to talk to us outside of formal channels. And so we monitor social media, we give information, and we have things going there. We have put out everything from briefings to concerts on our platforms, across our platforms, as part of our engagement strategy. The logistics portfolio, to manage the logistics for an organization like this, it has been one of our weaknesses over time. It is to provide everything that this organization needs in a timely manner where it's needed, on time, on target, is a whole production in of itself. I mean, we're in a Jamaican context, we're a large organization. When you add police, district constables, and civilian workers, if we were in the US, we'd probably be second or third largest police force in the country. So we're that kind of size, but we're the sole police force really in the country, other than the specialized things that MOCA delivers. The Kingston, again, this is something that we'll be progressing this year. We have to look at our policing model for Kingston and do that and integrate that a bit better, as opposed to having it as a reflection of what happens out in the parishes. So over the year, certainly over the financial year, this is what we look at, which ends March this year. We're looking at 109 police facilities, and this is how many. 55 were completed, 26 starting or near completion, pending projects, etc. This is the kind of investment required if we really want a police force that can deliver some of the things that we've been demanding of it. It's no point having our officers or our public going into broken down old buildings to try and get a service from people who don't have a proper chair to sit on and can't, nowhere to do anything, and hope that we're going to get the results we want. So the investment in our facilities is a key investment, with one, how the police are seen, how the police see themselves, and how the public and the type of services and the quality of service we can give to our public and demand of our members. In terms of our equipment, we have, this is just, and it's probably good for the diaspora to see this. This is a line for some of our vehicles. Each one of those pickups that you see are equipped, have particular modifications on it for police work, as do the motorcycles. But all of these vehicles that you see are tracked, so we know where they are, what they're doing. If they drive in a particular way, we get alerts. If there's an accident, we get a report almost immediately on what happened prior. It's part of our accountability framework. We're also doing some work. There's a board looking at new uniform designs. If we look at the one in the center, where we have visibility of our officers and they have the equipment on them, and that their uniform can actually take things like body cameras, and they have the correct utility stuff and so on, using materials that are current technology, etc. So this is some of the work. This is a work in progress. Hopefully we can sign off and move to this this year in 2021. Again, tasers were introduced probably back end of 2019, early 2020, with that within the force with policy on the use of these less lethal options, and also training of our members on them. The body-worn cameras, this was a long process in the development of this, and had to be. When we can't afford to make mistakes, we're talking about thousands of body-worn cameras storing images from thousands of cameras that are running 24 hours a day. It can't, we have to be we have to make sure that the back end could take the number of cameras we use, and that the actual cameras that we buy are the right ones. And so we went through a lot of field testing and so on. So late last year, probably last quarter of last year, it was all of that work had been done, and we started to buy cameras. At this point, it's really just buying more cameras within the budget to equip more of our police officers with this. We see it as a big thing for accountability, but also for protection of our officers against malicious statements and so on. It helps everybody. The public is helped, and our officers are helped, and our officers are on board with this. And I think it's important to note that, because nowadays, if you don't have a body-worn camera, you're the only one at the scene that doesn't have a camera going. Every scene we have, there are people around with cameras filming. So, there's no hiding. All right. Again, this is just one example. This, on top of this car, from public safety and traffic enforcement, are cameras that monitor license plates. It does automatic license plate recognition, and this is how it's set up. This setup is going to be is being established. We are going through vehicles now. They come fitted, and then we install the tablet and keyboards so that we can do things like check. The smart check and vehicle tracking software allows us, well, in this particular vehicle, it will automatically give an alert if the license plate comes up that has a warrant against it or tickets against it and so on, and outstanding things. So this this technology is being rolled out in our vehicles. Now Smart Check is something up and running so that our officers stopping somebody can know who they are, if there's anything on them at the moment. So it's again, it's a working process where 11,000 person organization doesn't happen overnight, and it's very budget dependent how quickly we can roll it out. As we do more of this online, and this quarter, between this quarter and next quarter, we'll be rolling out the pilots for our case management system to support our CID across the island, and also our station record management system. And I think that's in another slide. So let me just push ahead. And again, the last item on here is important. We need to know our public what's going on, what kind of service we're giving. Again, I'm not going to spend much time on this, but it really is a line of things that we either done or in the process of doing. So none of these things you'll see on this are either a pipe dream or something that perhaps one day, if everything here has a timeline to it. As I say, the station records management system is really what replaces the station diary, and we're looking at pushing out these very quickly. It goes on, all of these things, all of these are in the pipeline to get done on a very, very aggressive timeline. All of this is about developing the legitimate capacity of the force to deal with the problems we face and deliver a service that our country can be proud of. In terms of our engagement, and I recognize that I've probably run on for too long, but it's very difficult to go quickly on when you're doing a lot of things. Again, we've recognized this is a key component, and CMOC is obviously a key stakeholder to one, understand what we're doing, but also to understand the things that support what we're doing. And on here, we see the Diaspora as a key partner in this. But what I need from the Diaspora and the discussions we have with the Diaspora need to evolve over time. If the same discussions we're having 15 years ago are the same discussions we have now, then nothing has moved. And I think both Jamaica has moved, the JCF has moved, and the Diaspora has moved. So we'll continue to have new conversations and different conversations about how we can support. I don't want, and don't get me wrong, I am very grateful on behalf of the JCF, grateful for all of the support over time that the Diaspora has given to us in terms of physical support stations. Groups send money, we paint a station, we do something for a station. But that's not the way you develop a structured police force. Structured police force has a maintenance schedule where we maintain our buildings per schedule. Where when you're not talking about, we can't put out a police car because they don't have tires. A police force that looks like that, you cannot ask them to deliver high quality policing and a high quality service. It just doesn't match. So the discussions we'll have with the Diaspora and ourselves is to be a different discussion. How do we fit in? How do I leverage all the experience, the knowledge? How do I allay fears within the Diaspora? How do I keep everybody up to date with what we're doing as a key stakeholder? When you look at what is happening in some of our partner countries and how they are managing things like COVID and how we are managing it, it starts to create a different dynamic in terms of what are we really doing with our own country and how do we develop it. So I hope that it has been somewhat valuable. Again, this is online on our website. You can just go to it. There are numbers in there that people can call to get to. Each division has a liaison person who deals with things with returning residents. And we've done everything beyond the handbook. There are certain places where there are high concentrations where we have actual patrols there who look about that, and we support in various ways. Everything from vetting people who returning residents want to work for them to escorting people from banks. We've done the range of things. Now, clearly, we won't do every time you go to a bank, escort somebody, but it is part of what we're doing. So this is basically my final slide, and I thanks for the opportunity to share this with you. We are continuing our expansion thrust. The budgetary investment is critical to getting to where we need to go, and the legislative support to support what we do to make it, to create enough deterrence in the minds of people who wish to break the law is very important, that we get those things done. And with what we're doing and the coordination across the environment with security and non-security people, I think we have a good opportunity to meet our 2030 vision. This is on our force for good, rule of law, and respect for all are those guiding principles that when our police officers meet upon a situation they're unfamiliar with, they can use these to guide what they need to do in any of those circumstances. So thank you, and there are our social media tags if you wish to follow us. Right. So thank you very much. I probably went way over what I was supposed to do, but you know me, Lloyd. I can't. It's very difficult to condense that any further.
You're doing great.
So thank you.
We wanted more. We wanted more. So you did really good.
And I went for about 45, 50 minutes, I think. Right.
Can I just jump in real quickly? I'm glad to see that the slides include something about diaspora. That's a very important piece of it. I guarantee you that the way we do business, we don't just stay here and look at what's going on there and criticize and throw things at you. That's not what we want to do. What we've done so far is we've sat down with teachers, just sit down and talk. We want to know what is your day-to-day look like. We want to know what are your issues that you have on a regular basis, because maybe we have someone in the diaspora can help you to get to the goal that you want to get to. And it's the same thing with the nurses. It's the same thing. We sit with nurses and we have a summit and we talk, we listen, we want to hear. And so in order for us to be impactful in our move forward, we want to be able to sit with your departments, sit with your police officers, and see how we can bring. Because we don't want to take anything here and just throw down in Jamaica. That don't make any sense. It's two different situations. I tell you, for example, I've learned so much that our system in America is totally different from the system in Jamaica. Completely different. There's no way in which an attorney or a judge can leave here and go to Jamaica and immediately immerse it. Don't make no sense, right? And so what we're here to do is to sit down.
You said that with Judge Hemmings on. I hope he agrees with you.
Well, in our system here in America, we pit two attorneys against each other to come to a decision, right? In Jamaica, it's totally different. And so we have to understand what the rules are and the game is, so that we can fit ourselves in. And this happens in anywhere, any one of the agencies or anywhere in our country. In order to get to goals, we have to understand what the needs are and how we're going to get to it. So I so appreciate this, because we were able to see how Lloyd fit and how what you do, what Lloyd fits into what you do. And so now it's our job now to come in and see how we can fit ourselves in. That I appreciate.
Also to, that's one side, but also to communicate for us.
Yes.
What some of these things are very valuable. Our communications part
Yes.
is a key component of what we do. And sometimes we're not the best messengers.
Absolutely. I know.
Sometimes, other people do a better job of that, although we're trying to develop how well we do that. But just as an aside, we're actually embarking, and by September, certain aspects of our course should be ISO 9001 compliant. So we're actually doing that as a thing. But you can't fit everything in a presentation.
That's exactly it. That's good. That's good to hear. Moderator, I'm sorry to take away your time, sir.
No. This was great, and this is exciting, and it's especially exciting because there's so many kudos coming in for both of our speakers, for Major General Anderson, Commissioner Anderson, and also for Lloyd Distant. But in addition, there are literally a million questions coming in. And I know, especially for people in the diaspora, even folks living on the island of Jamaica, we seem to be so consumed with hearing about the Lanspaw gang and the Buckner gang. And then, of course, that horrible case from a couple of days ago involving Chloe and Trelawney. And these are the things that it seems captivate us and make us feel that this is the idea that we have of Jamaica. So hearing from you both tonight has helped to allay some of those fears that we've had, because we're hearing about a police force that is the leading police force in the region, one, and it's not only is it the leading police force in the region, it is a police force that is engaged in the community, that's highly technologically advanced. In fact, hearing that the rapid response team in Montego Bay was carrying homework for 250 students every day, truly warmed the cockles of my heart. I felt if it wasn't by Zoom, I would have to kiss you, Major General Addison. All right, I know you don't take kisses. All right, but listen, this is really amazing. But let's jump ahead to our questions that we have here. And one of the very first questions really comes out of, I believe this is Major General Anderson's one of his favorite scriptures, found in Isaiah 50, verse 10. If you are walking in darkness without a ray of light, trust in the Lord and rely on your God. Well, the very first question that we have here from the community, from Bruce Barkley, is asking, what is the role of churches in the strategic plan? We're going to direct this question actually to Lloyd Distant, because Lloyd actually gave us that answer early on. But clearly, Mr. Barkley wasn't listening carefully. Kidding, Mr. Barkley. Go ahead, Lloyd. Go ahead. Right.
Absolutely. So the churches have played a key role in us arriving at the consensus and shown tremendous leadership in engaging and providing their own feedback. I think of all the civil society groups, the churches has the deepest reach, and probably not just only the deepest, but the most credible reach into many of the communities. Both the Jamaica Council of Churches as well as the Jamaica Umbrella Group of Churches were part of the stakeholder group that signed off on this. They're more so engaged and aligned on the social and cultural transformation activities. One of the things that we recognize in a number of their activities is they're doing things because they think it's the right or best thing, not necessarily because it is a proven activity that works. There's an empirical basis that says, if I do these things, here's the outcome and results. And they've really plugged into the work and the approach that is being led by the Violence Prevention Commission, as well as the Citizens Security Plan. So church is very much involved. They've been plugged in from the very onset in signing off on the most important elements of the consensus, and the work plan for the church's involvement, particularly in social and community transformation, is defined and being defined as we go along.
Totally awesome. Thank you so very much, Lloyd. As you may or may not know, Lloyd has been one of the longest serving members of the organization of which he is the president, right? And the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce. And he is, in terms of technology, he is the go-to person in the private sector in Jamaica for looking for technological advancement on the island. But more importantly, he is the person that people tap when they want to mentor, they want someone to mentor, to set up a plan for how it is that we get the superstars in the Jamaica.
You're being too kind, Judge Hemmings.
No, I was just reading from what you sent me. No, I'm kidding, I'm kidding that one. No, It's the truth. It's the truth. It's the truth.
There are quite a few great resources in the private sector, but the point I would certainly want to patch in on is, we're not devoid of capable people here in Jamaica, and we recognize that when we go into diaspora, there's so much more talent and knowledge base that we can pull on, and we're not doing a good enough job of doing that. So, notwithstanding, Keith Duncan at the PSOJ or Michael Leckie at the Small Business Association, we very much want, the commissioner mentioned, we very much want to engage the diaspora even more, share more details around our plans, and to get more feedback and input in terms of how we can improve what we're doing.
Right. Thank you so very much. And I was kidding. Lloyd actually did not send me
I realize that.
I'm just speaking from what I know of him. But if we could switch now to a question for the commissioner, and this is important because apparently the average salary of a Jamaican entering member of the Jamaica Constabulary Force is approximately $71,000 a year. They get approximately $34,500 in a housing allowance, and they get an additional $10,000 in what's guaranteed overtime. That comes out to less than $1,000, much less than $1,000 US every month. Mm. And the question that I have coming at you, Commissioner, is there a comprehensive community hearts and mind plan? And that's important because the rate at which we're paying our officers, they're clearly underpaid, and we need to do something about increasing their pay. And that's not an offense to you, because you certainly have been pushing for that. But is there a comprehensive community hearts and minds plan where we can all work together, not only in increasing the pay for our officers, but also in making sure that your plan and this plan is effective and sustainable?
Okay, so I think there are like two parts to that. The part about the higher salaries of police officers, that's why I have a CMOC. That's why Lloyd is here. to advocate for that. But yes, I mean, and it's the rate at which things change over time, and that is a challenge. But in terms of a community, the hearts and minds.
Yes.
So even this thing of homework, as I said, and outreach that COVID allowed us an opportunity to do is not something that started with COVID. It's something that we were doing before as part of a strategy to build bridges between the JCF and communities. Some of those bridges significantly needed building, and I've used as an example, and I think it was the example that the private sector organization of Jamaica got interested in when they realized what we were doing. We took one of our most violent communities where we really went into those communities previously, 2 vehicles, probably with military as well, to go and do patrolling in there, very violent. Historically had beheaded people and all sorts of things. Mm-hmm. And went on a very deliberate intervention and engagement strategy where our police were working with the community on some things. And I must say that was in the context of when we had the state of public emergency, which allowed us to remove the gang from the space long enough to give the people, the community, a chance to breathe and actually engage the police. Sometimes it's very difficult for a community to engage us if the gang is very present and very violent, because nobody wants to be seen as talking to the police and get retribution from that. So what it allowed us to do is to take advantage of that space and create an engagement with the community that allowed us to assist the community and build with the community. And so we went from this position of basically going in to that community, number of police officers with rifles and vehicles and so on, to a police officer driving his own car in uniform in there and people waving. And so, we are already embarked on that. That's part of our, if we don't have that as along with all of our hard policing strategies and our other strategies. I mean, the truth of the matter is our circumstance in Jamaica requires an integrated policing approach. It integrates what some people call hotspot policing. It integrates community policing that matches the communities, our type of communities. And our type of community is not uniform across the country at all. We have different types of communities within that, but we have to police all of them. And so, yeah, so there's a very deliberate strategy that we've been rolling out. It is a component of every divisional plan of engagement, and that is how we have a farm watch program as well, a neighborhood watch program, a police youth club program, a beach watch program, and all of these are actual live programs that, you know, all of them are happening almost all of the same time to create better engagement. So yes, that is definitely a part of what we do, and yes, strategy. And but I'm going to end. I have to say again that I have no problem with Lloyd and his group advocating for higher police salaries. Please go right ahead and do so.
Consider it coming, Commissioner. Consider it coming.
I have one question, Commissioner. Just one question. You know, there's a balance between, there has to be a balance between, or somewhat, between law enforcement, the judicial, and corrections. And I wonder if, I'm sure you're away, do you find there's enough support or from the judicial, where the law enforcement depends on? Is there a balance between that judicial and the law enforcement? And is there a balance, a good balance between the judicial and the correction? I bring that up because it's important to know if we are handling our caseloads at the judicial area, judicial, because that impacts how policing is done and correction. So
okay, so I just add one other piece to that conversation. It's what Parliament does in terms of creating law, because really the judiciary adjudicates on laws, and so you know there is a part, there's a part from the policies of whichever government is in power, moving towards creating legislation to deal with problems that exist and how that aligns. Yes. Then from that process now, judges interpret. Yes. Now, if, for instance, the legislation says that without more says, okay, everybody has a right to bail, then that then is interpreted a particular way. Or let us say in terms of the proceeds of crime, you want people who are exhibiting extraordinary wealth and have no means of how they acquired that wealth to be that the state can ask, well, where did you get that money from? And you have to then say, okay, I got it from, I won the lottery, or my mother gave it to me, whatever it is. But so a law like that, you know, seems self-evident in dealing with matters like corruption and so on. But you can have a constitution that does not allow you to have a reverse burden of proof. And that is one of the challenges we're finding, that there were changes to the Constitution for perhaps good reasons to protect the individual right and protect people in that way. But what it does, it means when it goes across to the courts really have little option, especially if something is removed from the Constitution through constitutional amendment, to impose reverse burden because it makes sense to do so when the legislators have said no. You know, so this is one of the challenges, and this is one of the things that have been raised with CMOC when they're talking about legislation that supports what we do, what our reality, as opposed to legislation over here and our reality somewhere over here. So there's that part. Between us and the judges, clearly the Chief Justice has moved significantly to create a certain predictability about the delivery of judicial services. And that's a work in progress for him, and getting that done. Get time frames around things, and getting it tighter, tightening up on the thing. But ultimately, of course, a judge is independent but guided, you know, and has to be. So that process, so we have to request legislative changes. So I have that expansion of my legal department. I have a much more robust legal department, and the part of their mandate is to look through any legislation being passed to look at what the law enforcement concerns are with that legislation, if there are concerns, and look at how we advise on these things. It's one of those professions, law enforcement, that everybody's an expert. and so, you know, we have to put our expertise out there and assist that process. In terms of corrections, briefly, we have I think the recidivism rate is 40%. We basically get 1,000 people out of jail per year, put another 1,000 back in. That's rough figures. What that means is that I have 400 persons coming to me out of the 1,000 who are going to recommit a criminal act, having just been schooled by people who are better criminals than themselves in prison to come back out and do it again. So I don't start at a zero base. I start based on figures that 400 are coming to me who are experienced. Now, when you look at that, it makes it, you can't overmake the case for the necessity to have our institutions, our correctional system as a proper correctional system that corrects. That at the end of it, your recidivism rate is dropping and dropping and dropping. That needs to be the goal, and that the conditions of incarceration are such that it is organized, it is disciplined, it is structured, and it carries you through a process of releasing you on the other side a better person. That is what you have to do, because whether we like it or not, we change roughly the prison population every 3-point-something years. So once you know that, there's no workaround making that experience one, that you don't want to come back, but two, that you don't need to come back. So that's what I say.
Thank you.
Right. See that? That's
You
what
know,
happens.
Norman and Leo, I just want to make some very quick comments on a couple of the points that have been raised a short while ago. You know, the commissioner raised reverse burden of proof in the Proceeds of Crime Act, and you know, when we signed the consensus, particular timelines were agreed with the government and with the opposition at the time in terms of some legislative approvals that they're going to drive through specific timelines, but for us, the timelines were not sufficiently aggressive. And one of the things that we're pleased to see coming out of the CMOC's engagement with the government, ensuring resources are in place, the minister has been able to come back to us and said, I said a timeline was September, the timeline is now June. So we're seeing real progress in the government and the opposition coming together and saying, we recognize how important this is. We're going to press through whatever political challenges we may have to ensure we get these constitutional changes, if they're required, or legislative changes that are required. We're going to advance those in a very purposeful way. The other point about the budget, I'll just comment very quickly on two components of it. on the operating budget side of it, so, we speak about the monetary and fiscal space that we achieved through the IMF program. And that was quite significant in helping us in two ways. One, providing the space on the operating budget side. So the Ministry of Finance, I believe it's like 2% over the prior year. So it's not significant, but it's a step in the right direction. But we're taking that step at the same time that we have to find a way to increase salaries and assist Commissioner Anderson to move from 11,800 members of the force to 14,000. So we have that fine balance of increasing salaries and increasing the number of people at the same time. The area I'm most pleased about, though, is in relation to the capital budget. And the Commissioner spoke about the investments in transformation that are taking place. We see a lot of projects, and people don't immediately ask where the money is coming from. In 2016-17, our capital budget for the Ministry of National Security was just about $3.6 billion. In 2018-19 or 2019-20, that figure skyrocketed to $20 billion. So the investments, part of the reason why I believe we've gotten some of the successes the Commissioner has spoken about is because the government is committing the resources to support the transformation program. So it's not because of will of commissioners before necessarily, but the availability of resources is very different this time around. And I've got to say, the CMOC has reviewed a number of presentations by the Commissioner, and we are quite pleased with the progress that is being made on the transformation front. So Commissioner, you can think about.
Right. So yeah, so it's interesting. So earlier we were joking about Calabar, Campion, and JC. But one of the questions from Daniel Jenkins, and I'll direct it to you, Lloyd, Mr. Distant, is will schools be a part of this plan? Although I think it was already answered, but maybe you can elaborate on that. And what is the short win being sought, and how will that impact the social welfare? If that makes sense.
So we speak about three elements getting actively involved. So we speak about the churches, the family, and the schools. There's a stream of work related to the transformation of our culture that requires the school's involvement. So as an example, when I was in school, I did civics. Civics is no longer part of the educational program. So there are a number of elements that have been identified where we envision the Ministry of Education and the school's involvement are required to support the program. One of the things I would say more than anything else, there's been a lot of skepticism over an extended period around, are we going to get this done? Our view has been, as a society, and by extension, the diaspora, we've got to rally behind a plan to make this happen. This is not intended to be a talk shop. So if we're going to rally together to get this happening, we need people in the schools to say, I'm going to do what I need to do to reduce this, what we're seeing in terms of violence on the roads. The only person who doesn't need to, who know are not going to sign up to this is going to be the criminals, right? So we know the criminals are not going to sign up to this. But we need to be very purposeful in terms of all of Jamaica and the diaspora rallying behind saying, we are going to support this and get this done, just like we did with EPOC. So you asked me for my quick win. My quick win is everybody saying the commissioner needs this support. We are going to stand up behind the commissioner. We're going to go to the politicians. We're going to take another look at the budget, and we're going to give him the support for the things that we believe will give the most impact. But I mean, I think there's a solid plan there. But we just need to rally behind this defined program of initiatives and activities to deliver this reduction in crime for Jamaica.
Excellent, excellent. Dr. Ava Eagle Brown asks this question. She says, as someone who left Jamaica because of the crime rate, how does this plan impact me in terms of reassuring me that I should return? And if in fact crime is dictated by the unemployment rate in a nation, what if any impact does this plan have with respect to the unemployment rate? And I guess both of you can respond to that, both the commissioner and you,
Right.
Lloyd.
Okay, so crime, and again, I just make the distinction. So in terms of unemployment and crime, so what we've seen over time is that we're in communities that are depressed communities without much resources, you tend to see a fluctuation in crime depending on opportunity. Employment opportunities. If construction is taking place in that community, you'll see certain types of crime use, particularly acquisitory crimes, crimes for profit. Not so much with violence. So violence runs on a different track, and that is why we have more violence in a number of countries and places that are more depressed in terms of finances, in terms of poverty, and so on. That's because, as I say, with the violence, it's really what happened previously that is impacting it, and how we resolve differences. Now, and I deliberately spoke about some of the categories of people who are involved in it. Now, if you find that 900 or so of the people are really gang affiliates and gang related, our most endangered population are young gang members. Their likelihood of death is so far beyond anybody else that it's ridiculous. And so a lot of the strategy has been and has to continue to be about how we not get people into the gang. And there are a number of strategies. Probably time won't allow us to go into all of those, and some of those strategies are national strategies on dealing with youth and engaging youth. But so in that context, a lot of what you see is gang related. Then the other part of it is those persons who have conflict within intimate partners and within the family, which is again that one that I think Judge Norman mentioned a few days ago with that youngster who got shot, that 4-year-old. It was two brothers at it, and so on. And so you see, we charged last year about 500 people for murder. I mean, that's what we do. But the point is, we charge that many people, but that means we had 500 murders, they had to do before I could charge them. And so, the process is that on the numbers of persons we charge and how quickly we charge them has gone up significantly. And all major crimes year on year, the overall major crimes year on year go down. For the period, and the period that I came to the police force to work, and I was working with what happened before was we were at 1,600 plus murders, so very, very high. One of the 3 high points we've had in our history. We dropped it nearly 22% the first year. It bounced a little bit and we went up 3%. Then we went back down in 2020 about 1.9%, and as of today, I'm 10% below last year. Now, early on in the year, that can fluctuate a lot in a very short time because you're talking about small numbers over big numbers, but that's where we are today. So what I'd say to anybody, if your information, and this is why this is important, if all the information comes from headlines, then you'll be scared, not only here, but in most places. But we have some particularly sensational headlines around sometimes that don't fully explain or put context to what is happening, because you could see something that says, well, a 4-year-old, and I mean, we jumped ahead on that to make sure that people had the context of that. But you could easily have a headline that says 4-year-old killed, you're young, you have a young family, you want to come back to Jamaica. I'm not coming back to Jamaica because a 4-year-old was killed. Nobody said, well, they was killed by their uncle, that they organized it. Or in a person came back and was building their house and all of that, and then they are killed. Nobody said that the person who killed them was their intimate partner. You know, so without context, it creates a lot of fear. And in our victimization surveys that have been done, there's always been a big gap between people's personal experience and how they perceive the overall. And we have to close that gap, because it's more the fear of it than the actual thing that I think is driving our narrative.
Yeah, it's interesting, Commissioner, and I'm going to ask Lloyd a separate question as well. But one of the questions that Tamu Good, and you partially answered this question, he says, when you spoke about the fact that you expect 400 of the folks who have gone into jail and are coming out are going to recidivate, right? And so the question that Tamu is asking is, what is the plan, or is there a plan to rehabilitate juveniles, especially the youth, once they're in the system, once they're incarcerated? Is there some plan in place to rehabilitate them? Right.
So again, I'm not an expert on the correction side.
Right.
But I'm aware. Certainly, I was involved in the process of developing the juvenile remand facility in Kingston. I was in a different hat. I was chief of defense, and our engineers redid that and so on. And at that time, we built in specific classroom facilities, etc., so that those things could take place where these juveniles were. Within the overall corrections, again, I don't want to speak because I'm not an expert on the internal workings, but I'm aware that there are actual programs running that seek to, within our juvenile facilities, that seek to allow people to come out better than they went in. But also on the adult side, there's an equal requirement to do that. And I know that there are discussions, because I'm privy to those discussions about how best we do it. It's always been a feature, but I don't know how resourced it is. I don't know if Lloyd has had a chance to explore this.
I can certainly pick up on that, if you don't mind, Judge Hemmings. So, as mentioned, there's a specific stream that has to attend to the work of the Department of Correctional Services. Again, very much evidence-based, a study done in 2015, updated in 2019, outlining a number of specific initiatives and investments that need to take place. The rehabilitation and personal development and education of offenders, reintegrating, expanding our probationary systems, and how we reintegrate released offenders back into society so they don't become part of that 400 that the commissioner has to take on back in a year later. Right. But it also looks at expanding a range of community service options, investments in the physical condition of prisons, and in particular looking at the human rights obligations that exist. So there's a comprehensive plan. They've started implementation as far as 2018, 2019. And then there's some specific KPIs related to that plan that we're going to be monitoring for delivery as well. Very similar to how we're monitoring the JCF transformation program. We'll be doing the same on the correctional services side.
Thank you so very much. And then this addresses a number of our questioners here this evening. We're not going to get to everyone because we know we're running out of time. But this is the overarching question is, will we be removing customs duties on CCTV for homes and businesses? If it's too politically charged, then we can move on to the next question because we certainly have a lot of them.
I'm making a note of it, and I'm certainly going to have the conversation. It's not something that has come up as part of the conversations before, right. But I see the commissioner smiling, so I'm sure anything that expands the Jamaica Eye program, he'll be very pleased to see.
Well, no, because
I'm not making
that discussion we has been had as well,
Okay.
you know, but you know, when you start to ask for the removal of duties on something after in a contracted environment,
Economy.
it becomes even, in other words, a discussion we were probably having a year ago, we'd have to
It's a very different
rehab the
conversation now.
discussion. You know, so.
Fair point.
All right. The last time that you were here, Commissioner, I believe the St. Andrew North Division was leading in murders at that time. And so the question from one of our listeners here, Larkland Morley, is there a geographic change in where major crimes happen over the years?
So what we saw, I tell you, so yes and no. So no being that a lot of the areas where traditionally there were violent, and we're going to talk about violent crimes, no, not just crime generally. So violence have been hotspots for a long time. You know, so in the approach to get that big 1,000 block, we have to look at those spots. Those are key spots because these are the spots where the gangs operate or there's a high concentration. So as long as, you know, one can remember places like Kingston, West St. Andrew South, and so on were a problem. Later on, Montego Bay, St. James became a problem largely as a fallout from a legal drug trade that was protected by gangsters. And when that fell apart, gangsters had the means of the weapons for protection now become the source of financing. And so you saw some changes and increase in violence there, and so on, as the money was drying up because of significant law enforcement work around the cocaine trade, right? So that changed. So what we're seeing now, and it means that we've had to change our narrative and our discussion about displaced criminals. That narrative doesn't work so well in a current environment. What used to happen is that criminals largely did crime where they were. So gangs operated in their own space, they did crimes there, they may go out and they come back and they're very much based geographically. Now, gang leaders may have a little more flexibility, but the gang itself was very, very, very geographically located. If they came under pressure, then the gang member would move to perhaps the country, in the country parts where they have relatives to cool out. And if they stay there long enough, they may start their activities a little bit there. That was an old paradigm. Nowadays, a gangster from Kingston will go to Montego Bay for a party and drive back the next day or the same night. The same things that give us better mobility, the same things that the Chamber of Commerce loves in terms of highways to move their goods up and down the country and all that, is the same arteries that our gangsters move on. So their access to the internet, the way they think, because these are young people. So whether you're a young person in crime or in entrepreneurial activities, you're young people, you don't see distance the same way. The ownership of motor cars has been completely democratized. Everybody has a car. They can move back and forth across the country. And because they move, they know each other. They know persons in another area. And so we have to look at a much more fluid response to their movements than just moving from here to cool out somewhere else. It's a different paradigm in terms of how we do that. And so things like our monitoring, our surveillance activities along routes, major routes, matter. Cameras at the entry and exit of a town matter. Along roads matter, so that we don't just patrol, but intelligence, information, surveillance is leading us to do activities a particular way.
Wow.
I don't know if that answered it.
No, it certainly does. This has been a magnificent discussion that we've been having here this evening. But Rookie Wilson, who is the chair of the Citizens Security and Safety Task Force for JTAN, is going to strangle me if I don't do this part. All right, literally, right? In fact, she said, I've received a couple of foul words by text. I'm kidding. No. So, all right. So listen. So this is it. If you both could kindly give us some contact information that you feel safe in giving out, where the other questions we can send them to you that we have received in, and then we're going to turn it over to Rookie Wilson, who's going to do a closeout for us. So if you have some contact, if it's an email address at your ministry, at the JCF or the Jamaica Chamber of Commerce email address or something where they can send you the additional questions that you feel comfortable responding, or your staff responding to at a later time.
One of the things that we're going to do, we're still going to take all of these questions as one of the plans that we have and put them in a Q&A with Lloyd. So Lloyd will probably take them, put them in a Q&A, and then we will distribute the responses to all of the questions across network. Okay. Yes. So everyone who's posted a question in here, it's not gone for naught. We will get a chance to answer. You'll get a chance for a response. Right, Lloyd?
Yeah, that is correct. I mean, yeah, that commitment from myself, and the Commissioner's office is also committed to, we will provide responses to all questions that come in and provide additional information or further clarification as required.
Right. So in my next life, I'm definitely going to have a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering and a master's degree in defense administration, like the commissioner. And I definitely want to have the kind of money and resources that Lloyd Distance has in my next life. Unfortunately, there's no hope because I'm almost at the end of my life. But thank you both so very much for a wonderful presentation this evening. I want to turn it over.
Commissioner wanted to say something. Commissioner, I think
sorry, Leo.
No. Go ahead. No. I just so I just encourage people. We're gonna, as you say, we'll give you all the details to contact us. But also, we try to respond as best as possible once you come on our social media platforms. So we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. We have a YouTube channel. You want to go look at a concert? Go look at it. We're on there. So anything from that to whatever you want. So I'd encourage people to just follow what we're doing so that you can be better informed and ask questions. We'll as best as possible answer them. But as I say, I'll give you specific email address for these type of questions. All right, so we'll get that out.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Rookie.
Thank you, Commissioner Anderson, Mr. Distant, Mr. Hemming, and Mr. Gillen for tonight, and our moderators behind the scene. Thank you all for joining us in the live chat on YouTube. Please subscribe to the JD10 TV YouTube channel to keep up with different events that are posted there, as well as jd10.org, our website that hosts all the different events coming up for JD10. On behalf of our Citizen Security and Safety Task Force and JD10, thank you all for spending your evenings with us. The email address for CMOC was shared in the chat on YouTube. Please feel free to forward your questions there as well, and follow JCF social media tag that was shared earlier. Thank you all for your time, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you too.
Thank you all.
Thanks. Excellent.
Excellent.
Yeah.